Jonathan Kane woke up with a start. For a moment, he wasn't sure where he was. Everything around him looked strange and unfamiliar. Instead of the soft bed he was used to, he was lying on a smooth, cold surface that felt like glass or some kind of polished stone. The air smelled clean but strange, like nothing he had ever breathed before. The light around him was soft but bright, coming from no clear source. It was almost like waking up inside a giant glowing bubble. As he slowly opened his eyes, Jonathan tried to move, but something felt different. The space around him was round, and it seemed like walls made of clear material surrounded him completely. They curved in all directions, making it look like he was inside a dome or a bubble. When he tried to stand, he found he could move freely, but the strange place gave him a feeling of being trapped. His heart beat faster as he looked around, trying to find a way out. There was no door, no window, no crack or gap. It was as if he had been put inside a giant jar with no way to open it. Panic began to rise inside him. "Where am I?" he asked himself aloud. "How did I get here?" Then in the corner of his eye, he saw a figure standing quietly. It was a woman, but not like any woman he had ever seen. She was tall and slender, with smooth, pale skin that seemed to shimmer slightly. Her eyes were large and dark, filled with a strange kind of calm. Her long hair flowed down her back, but it looked almost like it was made of soft light, moving gently even though she stood still. Jonathan tried to speak, but she said nothing. She didn't even move, except to watch him carefully. The silence between them felt heavy and strange. Jonathan's mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. He thought about his last memories. He had been on a research mission, studying unusual signals from a distant part of space. His ship had been damaged, and then nothing. The next thing he knew, he was here, alone. Or so he thought. The woman, he began to call her Virel in his mind, did not seem threatening, but Jonathan could not shake the feeling that he was trapped. The way she watched him was intense and silent, like she was waiting for something. For now, all he could do was sit and wait, hoping to understand why he was here and what she wanted. Hours passed. Jonathan's mind was full of questions and fears. He tried to talk to her, asking why he was captured and what she planned to do with him, but Virel remained quiet, never answering. She only watched him with those deep eyes. He felt hungry and tired, but food appeared without explanation. Small bowls of strange, colorful fruits and liquids appeared on a smooth table nearby. The taste was unfamiliar, but it kept him alive. Even so, the isolation was difficult. Jonathan missed human contact and the sound of voices. Despite his fear, Jonathan began to observe Virel more closely. She moved gracefully, her every step smooth and careful. She never looked angry or mean. Instead, there was something gentle about her. Sometimes she would sit down near him, watching him quietly, almost as if she was learning about him. One night, Jonathan dreamed of home, the warm sunlight on his face, the sound of birds, the smell of the ocean near his childhood house. When he woke, he found Virel standing closer than usual, her expression softer. She reached out a hand but pulled back quickly. It was a small moment, but it gave Jonathan hope. He realized that maybe she wasn't his captor in the way he thought. Maybe she was waiting for something too, something he did not yet understand. As the days went by, Jonathan's fear changed slowly into curiosity. He started to study the dome, the objects around him, and Virel's strange behavior. He noticed how she reacted when he moved or spoke. Sometimes she would mimic his actions, blinking when he blinked, tilting her head when he did. It was like a silent conversation. Jonathan knew he had to stay calm and patient. He decided to try and communicate using simple gestures and drawings on the smooth surface of the dome. He drew pictures of himself, of Earth, and of simple ideas like friend and help. Virel watched carefully, and sometimes she touched the drawings lightly, tracing his fingers. Though he still didn't understand why he was there or what the future held, Jonathan found a small comfort in this quiet connection. He no longer felt like a prisoner, but like a visitor in a very strange place. In that silent, glowing dome, two very different beings began to learn from each other. And for Jonathan Kane, the journey was just beginning. Days passed slowly inside the strange dome. Jonathan began to understand more about his surroundings and the mysterious woman, Virel. Though she still did not speak in words, she showed signs of intelligence and emotion that made him feel less alone. At first, Jonathan tried everything to communicate. He spoke loudly, hoping she would answer. He waved his arms, hoping to get her attention. But Virel did not respond with words. Instead, she watched him quietly, sometimes tilting her head as if trying to understand. Jonathan realized she was not like any human he had ever met. Her actions were gentle and careful. She never made sudden movements or loud noises. It was as if she was trying not to frighten him. One day, Jonathan noticed something new. Virel began to imitate some of his simple actions. When he blinked, she blinked. When he smiled, she smiled back, although her smile was soft and subtle, like a faint curve of her lips. This small gesture surprised Jonathan. It was the first real connection between them. Encouraged by this, Jonathan decided to try a different way of communicating. He looked around and found a smooth, flat surface inside the dome. Using a small stick-like tool, he started to draw simple shapes and pictures. He drew a circle, then a stick figure of himself. He drew a small house, a tree, and the sun. When Virel came closer, she looked at the drawings carefully. She reached out her long, slender fingers and traced the lines with a gentle touch. Jonathan smiled. Maybe this was the way to talk without words. He drew pictures of food, water, and sleep. He drew hands reaching out, hoping to show friendship and trust. Each time, Virel watched closely and tried to copy his movements. She even attempted to make simple marks herself, though her writing was strange and beautiful, like shapes made of light. Jonathan felt a small spark of hope. Maybe she was trying to teach him something too. Every day, they continued this silent exchange. Jonathan learned that Virel was curious and careful, but also cautious. Sometimes, when he moved suddenly or raised his voice, she stepped back and seemed worried. He understood that she did not want to scare him, or herself. Despite the silence, Jonathan started to feel less like a prisoner. The dome did not feel like a cage anymore. It was more like a space where two strangers from different worlds were trying to understand each other. Jonathan also began to notice small details about Virel's world. The dome was not just empty, it had soft light that changed gently with the time. Strange plants grew in corners, their leaves glowing softly. The air was fresh and clean, but it smelled of unfamiliar flowers and minerals. At night, the dome would darken, but soft stars appeared above, like a tiny night sky inside. Jonathan lay down and watched the stars with a quiet feeling of wonder. Virel sometimes sat nearby during these moments. She did not speak, but her presence was comforting. It was as if she was sharing the quiet night with him. One evening, Jonathan decided to try something new. He gently touched the surface of the dome where the two of them were separated. The dome was clear and smooth, but it felt like a solid wall between them. He watched Virel carefully. She reached out her hand too, placing it on the same spot. For a moment, their hands were almost touching, separated only by the invisible barrier. Jonathan's heart beat faster. He felt a strange connection, something like hope mixed with fear. Could this be the moment when the wall between them would finally break? But the dome did not open. Slowly, Virel pulled back her hand and stepped away. Her eyes looked sad, as if she wished she could reach him, but could not. Jonathan wanted to help her, to show that he was not afraid. So he smiled softly and pressed his hand again to the dome. This time, he spoke in a calm voice, saying, "I'm not your enemy. I want to be your friend." Varel watched him carefully. Her eyes seemed to soften. Then she reached into a small container nearby and took out a strange, glowing object. She held it out to Jonathan through the dome. He reached for it and took it gently. The object was warm and smooth. It felt alive in his hand. Jonathan looked at Varel with surprise. She smiled a little and nodded. It was as if she was offering a gift, a sign of trust. For the first time since he arrived, Jonathan felt a deep sense of connection with Varel. It was more than words or pictures. It was a feeling that grew between two very different beings. Even though he still did not know why he was here or what the future held, Jonathan understood one important thing. Varel was not trying to harm him. She was trying to reach out. That night, Jonathan slept better than he had in days. He dreamed of a future where they could talk, learn, and maybe even become friends. In the quiet dome, under the soft stars, two strangers began a new story. One of hope, trust, and the slow discovery of what it truly means to connect. Jonathan woke up to a soft light filling the dome. It was morning again, but this time, something felt different. When he opened his eyes, Varel was standing closer to him than before. Her dark eyes looked calm and gentle. There was no longer any fear or distance in her expression. Jonathan felt a small excitement rise inside him. Maybe today something important would happen. He remembered the glowing object she had given him last night. It rested on a smooth surface nearby, shining softly like a little star. Jonathan didn't know what it was or what it meant, but he held it carefully, feeling that it was a symbol of trust between them. He wanted to speak, but words were still difficult. Varel had not yet found a way to talk with him, and he knew that simple sounds might not be enough. Instead, he tried to communicate with his actions, smiling, nodding, and using his hands to show he meant no harm. Varel watched him closely. Then, slowly, she moved closer to the dome's wall where Jonathan had touched before. She lifted her hand and pressed it against the smooth surface, just like him. Jonathan copied her, placing his palm opposite hers. For a long moment, their hands were separated only by the invisible barrier. The warmth of her skin seemed to reach through, even though nothing could physically pass between them. Jonathan felt a connection stronger than anything before. He looked into her eyes, searching for a sign. Suddenly, Varel moved her hand away and stepped back, but this time with a soft smile. It was a small victory, a silent promise that she wanted to keep trying. Jonathan felt hopeful. He decided to try something new. He took a deep breath and gently tapped on the dome wall, making a simple rhythm. Then he waited. To his surprise, Varel tapped back, matching his rhythm carefully. The dome became a quiet instrument for their conversation, a place where sounds could travel but not hands. This was a breakthrough. Jonathan realized that even though they could not speak the same language, they could still find ways to communicate. Rhythm, touch, and patience might be the key. Encouraged, Jonathan drew more pictures on the smooth surface inside the dome. He drew simple shapes, circles, lines, and even faces. Varel watched and copied some of the drawings with her finger, making shapes that shimmered like light. Jonathan tried to teach her a few words. He wrote, "Hello," "friend," and "touch," with simple marks. Varel's eyes followed his movements carefully. Sometimes, she repeated the sounds he made, trying to mimic his voice. Her attempts were soft and quiet, but Jonathan smiled each time. Over the days, the silent exchange between them grew stronger. Jonathan learned more about Virel's world through small gifts she left nearby. There were glowing stones, tiny plants with soft leaves, and small devices that created gentle music. Jonathan tried to touch some of these objects, and Virel watched him with a smile, as if happy to share a piece of her life. One day, Jonathan noticed something new. Virel brought a small mirror and held it up to him. He looked into it and saw his own reflection, surprised and curious. Then she placed the mirror between them and touched her own face softly. Jonathan touched his face too. It was a simple gesture, but it made him feel closer to her. He realized that even though they were from different worlds, they shared some things, feelings, curiosity, and the desire to understand. Jonathan's fear began to fade. He stopped thinking of the dome as a prison. Instead, it became a place of learning and discovery. One evening, Jonathan sat quietly and watched Virel as she moved gracefully around the dome. She seemed different, more relaxed, less guarded. Suddenly, she stopped and looked directly at him. Her eyes were full of emotion. Without words, she seemed to say, "I trust you." Jonathan smiled back. He wanted to reach out, to break the barrier between them. Carefully, he moved to the wall and placed his hand on it. Virel did the same. Then, slowly, the dome's surface began to shimmer and ripple like water. Jonathan's heart raced. The barrier was changing. For the first time, a small opening appeared between them, just wide enough for their hands to touch. Jonathan reached through and felt the softness of Virel's skin for the first time. It was warm and gentle, unlike anything he expected. Virel smiled softly, her eyes shining with relief and joy. They held hands for a long moment, bridging the gap between their worlds. But then, the opening closed again, leaving them separated once more. Jonathan understood that this was only the beginning. The barrier would open more as their trust grew. He looked into Virel's eyes and saw hope, a hope that they could learn, grow, and maybe even change the future. From that day, their silent bond grew stronger. They shared gestures, drawings, rhythms, and touches. Each day brought new discoveries and deeper understanding. Jonathan knew that their journey was far from over. But for the first time, he felt that he was not alone. He had a friend in a strange, glowing world, and that friendship was worth everything. Jonathan could hardly believe what was happening. After days of silent communication and growing trust, the barrier that separated him from Virel had finally started to open. That tiny opening where their hands could meet was a symbol of something much greater. A connection between two very different beings from separate worlds. As their hands touched through the opening, Jonathan felt a warmth that went beyond the physical. It was a feeling of hope, trust, and something deeply human, connection. Virel's eyes held a softness he had never seen before, as if she had waited a long time for this moment. For a while, they simply held hands, letting the silence speak, louder than any words could. Jonathan noticed how delicate and gentle Virel was. Her skin was smooth and warm, and her fingers were slender but strong. It was clear she cared deeply, even if she could not express it in the way he was used to. The opening in the dome did not stay open for long. Slowly, it closed, leaving Jonathan's hand resting on the smooth surface again. But now the barrier felt different, less cold, less solid. It was no longer a wall to keep him captive, but a bridge that could open and close with trust. Jonathan wanted to understand more about Virel and why she had brought him here. That night, he sat quietly near the barrier, thinking. He decided to try something bold. He wanted her to share her story. Using the pictures he had drawn before, Jonathan created a simple sequence: a small ship, a crash, and a figure holding another figure. He showed it to Virel, hoping she would understand. Virel looked carefully at the drawings. Then she surprised him by taking a small crystal from a nearby shelf. The crystal glowed softly and showed images inside it, moving pictures that told a story. Jonathan watched, fascinated. The images showed a spaceship flying through space. Suddenly, the ship hit something and started to fall. Then a figure, Virel, herself, was seen rescuing someone trapped inside the ship. She carried the person to a safe place and stood watch over them while they slept. Jonathan realized that the person she saved was him. Virel's voice was soft and clear as she spoke, for the first time, using a language Jonathan could barely understand, but the meaning was clear. She had saved him from danger. She had protected him, not captured him. Jonathan's heart filled with gratitude and wonder. All this time, he had thought he was a prisoner. But in truth, Virel was his guardian. He wanted to tell her thank you, but words felt too small. Instead, he reached out and touched the opening in the dome again, hoping to feel her hand once more. Virel smiled gently and placed her hand on his. This time, the opening stayed open longer. They held hands, sharing a quiet moment of understanding. Over the next few days, their bond grew stronger. Virel taught Jonathan more about her world. She showed him the plants, the glowing stones, and the soft music that filled the air. Jonathan shared stories of Earth, his home, and the people he loved. They learned to speak a new language, not with words, but with gestures, drawings, and shared feelings. One day, Jonathan noticed that Virel seemed troubled. Her eyes were distant, and her movements slower. Concerned, he tried to comfort her by drawing a simple picture of two hands holding each other. Virel looked at the picture and then whispered, "Danger." Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know what danger she meant, but he knew. It was serious. She showed him another crystal with images of other beings, powerful and strict, who did not approve of her caring for him. These beings had rules against contact with outsiders. Jonathan understood. Virel had risked a lot by saving him and opening the barrier between them. He reached out to her and said firmly, "We will face it together." Virel's eyes shone, with relief and gratitude. For the first time, she spoke clearly in his language. "You are not captive. You are safe." Jonathan smiled. It was the first time he felt truly at home since arriving. Their connection was no longer just between two individuals. It had become a story of courage, trust, and the breaking of invisible walls. Jonathan knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he and Virel would face them together. Because she had not only saved his life, but had also asked for his touch. Not as a command, but as a plea from her heart, and Jonathan, with all his heart, gave it freely. After many days spent together, Jonathan and Virel's bond had grown stronger than ever. The invisible walls between them were no longer barriers, but bridges of trust and understanding. Jonathan knew that their story was special, something rare and beautiful. It was a story of two beings from different worlds, learning to connect beyond language, culture, and fear. One morning, Jonathan woke up feeling a new kind of hope. The dome around them still glowed softly, but the space inside felt warmer and more alive. Virel was already awake, standing near the edge of the dome where the barrier had opened before. Jonathan moved closer and reached out his hand. Virel met his gesture immediately, placing her palm gently against his. This time, the opening was bigger and stayed open longer. They stepped closer together, no longer separated by glass or fear. Jonathan looked into Virel's eyes and saw something he had never seen before: pure happiness. It was a look of relief, trust, and something deeper, a connection that went beyond words. For the first time, they stood side by side, free to touch, to hold hands, and to share moments without barriers. Jonathan felt the softness of Virel's skin and the warmth of her presence. She smiled, and Jonathan smiled back, feeling a peace he had never known since being brought to this strange place. As the days went by, their friendship grew into something more. They explored the dome together, learning about each other's worlds and dreams. Virel showed Jonathan the small garden she cared for, a place filled with plants that glowed softly and flowers that changed color in the light. Jonathan shared stories of Earth, the tall trees, the oceans, and the people he loved. He told Virel about his family, his work as a scientist, and the hope he had to understand the universe. Virel listened carefully, her eyes wide with wonder. Sometimes she tried to repeat his words, practicing the sounds slowly and carefully. Jonathan laughed softly when she said his name with a strange but sweet accent. They spent hours drawing pictures together, creating stories on the smooth surface of the dome. Each picture was a step toward understanding, a bridge between their two worlds. But the happiness they found was not without challenges. Jonathan knew that Virel's world was not always accepting of outsiders. There were rules and fears that kept them apart. And yet Virel had chosen to break those rules for him. One evening, as they sat quietly watching the stars that shimmered inside the dome, Virel spoke softly. "I broke the rules," she said, her voice filled with honesty and courage. "For you." Jonathan took her hands in his. "Thank you," he whispered, "for saving me, for trusting me, for everything." Virel smiled, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "You are not just a visitor. You are part of my world." Jonathan felt a warmth spread through his heart. He realized that he no longer wanted to leave. He did not want to return to Earth and the life he once knew. Here, with Virel, he had found something rare, a true connection, a new home. Together, they made a decision. Jonathan would stay, not because he was forced, but because he chose to. Because Virel had asked for his touch, not as a demand, but as a plea from her heart. And he gave it freely, with love and hope. Days turned into weeks. Jonathan and Virel grew closer. They learned each other's ways, shared quiet moments, and dreamed of a future where their worlds could come together in peace. Jonathan sent messages back to Earth, explaining that he had found a new family and a new home among the stars. He hoped that one day others would understand the beauty of connection across worlds. And in the glowing dome, under the soft light of distant stars, Jonathan and Virel stood together. Two souls from different worlds, united by trust, love, and the simple truth that sometimes all it takes is a single touch to change everything.